For many, a horror fan, hearing the word remake is an immediate turn-off. Whether it's remake, reboot, reimagining, reimaging, or whatever the buzz term of the day is, those words tend to scream a lack of imagination and lazy cash grab. Hey, why bother to come up with unique and fresh new ideas when you can return to the well with something tried and tested, right? However, some remakes actually manage to do the unthinkable, as in be pretty good, and that was certainly the case with the following films. They may not have been particularly necessary, but these do-overs were nonetheless all kinds of impressive. So with that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror remakes everyone expected to suck, but didn't. Number 10, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One of the most influential and iconic movies in horror history, fans were rightly up in arms when it was announced that The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was getting remade. And yet, time has been incredibly kind to Marcus Nispel's gorgeously grim retelling, which, while hardly necessary, packs a surprisingly mighty punch in a sea of listless horror remakes also produced by Platinum Dunes. It obviously doesn't get close to touching the 1974 original, but this remake does boast some appreciably gross visuals, as shot by the original film's own cinematographer Daniel Pearl. Plus, there's an extremely solid cast, especially Final Girl Jessica Biel and a scene-stealing R. Lee Ermey. And there are some truly unique set pieces to help set this apart from its predecessor. In an era where sanitized horror remakes were speedily churned out every couple of months, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre at least understood the essence of its inspiration, and in turn delivered a fitting redo. Number 9. Night of the Living Dead. Back in 1990, it was nothing short of sacrilege to consider remaking George A. Romero's legendary zombie film Night of the Living Dead. And so, it's no surprise the reviews at the time were largely negative, and that the remake was a total flop at the box office. However, watching the movie today, it's tough not to get swept up by director Tom Savini's stunning makeup effects, and also the film's smart reimagining of the original tale, with Romero himself having written the screenplay and not being afraid to make contemporary changes. Most praiseworthy is the remake's reinvention of its female lead, Barbara, who sees considerably more action this time out. While, as ever, Tony Todd is superb as fellow would-be survivor Ben. Look past the fact that Night of the Living Dead 1990 doesn't need to exist, and it's a rare remake crafted with real respect for what came before, while also feeling empowered to bring fresh ideas to the table. Number 8. Let Me In. There were eyeball rolls aplenty when 2008's masterful Swedish vampire film Let the Right One In was confirmed for a glossy Hollywood remake, complete with a budget almost 5 times that of the original. It was understandably expected that Hollywood producers would massively water down the original's more unsavory and challenging elements, making them more palatable to a multiplex audience that wants to be anything but challenged. And on top of this, there was much hand-wringing about the remake being written and directed by a fella called Matt Reeves, whose most prominent credit at the time was Cloverfield. Hardly a project that'd immediately qualify him to tackle this more pared-down, moody vampire film. Though Let Me In doesn't reach the heights of the original, it does offer up an impressively well-wrought retelling, elevated by Reeves' stylish direction and strong performances from Cody Smith-McPhee, Chloe Grace Moretz, and Richard Jenkins. All in all, way better than anybody expected. Number 7. The Ring. Gore Verbinski's The Ring kickstarted Hollywood's run of J-horror remakes throughout the 2000s, and unlike so many of those remakes, The Ring is actually, pretty good. Verbinski and his cinematographer Bojan Bizelli did a fantastic job giving the film such a distinct visual identity, with a sickly green tint present throughout that makes The Ring remake immediately recognizable from just a second's glance. That also speaks to the film's wider atmospheric achievements, relying less on gore and obnoxious jump scares, and more on skin-crawling vibes and slow-building suspense. It doesn't hurt either that Naomi Watts gives a terrific performance in the lead role as well. Absolutely ignore the 2 awful sequels that followed, of course, but for a remake that seemed primed to be nothing more than a hollow style-over-substance rehash, The Ring is impressive from start to finish. Number 6. Friday the 13th. Another shout out to director Marcus Nispel, who followed his solid 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake with a similarly decent Friday the 13th redo in 2009. This Friday the 13th remake went a little different to your usual do-over, essentially retelling elements of the first 3 Friday films, in turn serving as a streamlined origin of Jason Voorhees that ticks the boxes of showing what happened to Pamela Voorhees, that show Jason's actions in adulthood, and moves from burlap sack Jason to the iconic hockey mask look. This one doesn't skimp on the gore either, but also isn't afraid of a little goofy humor at times too, usually courtesy of a couple of stoners, or due to the intentionally horrendous dialogue of Travis Van Winkle wrinkles as hat do bro Trent. Special praise also has to go to Derek Mears, a stuntman, actor, and lifelong Friday the 13th fan who got to live out his dreams and play Jason here, delivering an intense, aggressive Jason that perfectly fit the tone of this remake. Plus, Derek is genuinely one of horror's good guys. Now, how about we finally get a new Friday the 13th movie for him, yeah? Sounds good to me. Number 5. Cat People. When a 40 years later remake of RKO's beloved 1942 horror film Cat People was announced, there was a lot of skepticism about the prospect of remaking a bona fide genre classic. But leave it to the great Paul Schrader to deliver a totally singular and unexpected remix of the original erotic horror story, taking the implication and innuendo of that 42 film and turning it inside out. The Cat People remake is explicit and very, very grim in ways that its predecessor couldn't due to the restrictions of the Hays Code of the time. By comparison, Schrader's take is an untamed beast, not unlike its central character. In addition to its more permissive content, the 1982 movie is also absolutely gorgeous. Colourful visuals stand in stark contrast to the original's monochrome style, and Natasha Ginsky's performance as the eponymous cat person is a sensual, unforgettable delight. Number 4. Dawn of the Dead. Even better than the 1990 Night of the Living Dead remake is Zack Snyder's 2004 take on Dawn of the Dead. Again, this was a remake nobody at all was asking for, and technically it's more of a reimagining than an out-and-out remake, but the end result is something pretty darn spectacular. While Romero's classic has a sense of playfulness dotted throughout, plus a whole bunch of social commentary and satire, Snyder's movie took that core concept and went full-on, balls to the wall, unrelenting horror. The pace of the 2004 Dawn of the Dead barely gives the audience room to take a breath, with the film immediately turning the terror up to 11 within its first few minutes, and barely letting up until its end credits roll. And even then, those end credits feature some gut-wrenching footage of our supposed survivors maybe not surviving after all, with the undead threat of the day clearly far too much to ever really escape from. Number 3. Child's Play. A Child's Play movie with no Brad Dourif and with swanky AI taking center stage? Yeah, no thanks. That was the response from the masses upon the news that everyone's favourite good guy doll was getting the remake treatment in 2019. Instead of Dourif, it was Mark Hamill taking on the Chucky role here, with Chucky a top-end tech buddy doll this time out. And in typical Mark Hamill fashion, he absolutely crushed it, delivering a delightfully menacing performance that pulled certain beats from Hamill's stunning work as the Joker over the decades. While the Child's Play franchise had often veered towards the comedic, this 2019 movie dropped the bulk of that humour, all in favour of some properly chilling antics from Chucky, including delivering someone's face to poor Andy Barkley at one point. Not cool, Chucker. Number 2. Quarantine. Another horror remake that genre fans saw coming a mile off is 2008's Quarantine, an ultra-faithful English-language retelling of the magnificent Spanish found footage film Wreck. Impressively, Quarantine rolled cameras just 2 months after Wreck was released, and the worst thing that can really be said about Quarantine is that it's faithful to a fault, I guess, offering up a beat-for-beat retelling of Wreck. Yet, it's well made. Jennifer Carpenter gives a very solid lead performance, and it actually makes one smart change from the original, as while Wreck's chilling ending is immediately followed up by jarring rock music through its end credits. Quarantine, yeah, that just leaves the audience to soak it all in, with eerie ambient sounds that just, yeah, not great, man. Properly unsettling. Never good. Number 1. Speak No Evil. For absolutely complete full disclosure, after watching Christian Tavstrup's Speak No Evil when it landed on Shudder, I personally had absolutely zero, minimal, nothing, no interest whatsoever in seeing a remake. That original movie, it is so well made and so well performed, but man, it was such a gut punch that there was just no interest here in rewatching that same story. It's a film that stays with you long after a first watch, but that's mainly in an impressively morbid, unsettling way, which is totally the point, but yeah, just no thanks, no remake needed. Surprisingly though, the 2024 remake is thankfully way better than anyone could have imagined, having a more crowd-pleasing third act, but still managing to capture the awkward tension of the original film. Plus, the redo benefits massively from James McAvoy's swinging for the fences performance. This remake doesn't so much try to replace the original or merely replicate it, but instead it serves more as a decent companion piece to the 2022 movie. That said, the original film's director, Christian Tavstrup, is not a fan at all of the changes made for the remake, lambasting the ending and also taking a shot at US culture as a whole.